I'm very happy to have the pleasure of introducing our graphics designer of the Max Planck Institute for the Science of Human History. Her name is Michelle O'Reilly, or as we call her, Shelley. So I hope that it's okay that the students can also call you Shelley.
Of course, no problems.
She has been working at the MPI for a while now, and she is mainly our person to go to if we want to have all of our nice graphics. As you might have noticed, many of our papers have really cool figures and graphics, and a lot of them come from her desk, and she helps us develop how to communicate science to everyone. And as we have seen in Christina Varina's keynote lecture today, this is an important part of science. So we are really happy that she took the time to be here and present us with this introduction. And yeah, Shelley, take it away.
Great, thank you very much for the invitation. I hope that this session will be interesting for you all, something different, and that you'll be able to take away some tips and tricks that you can apply straight away to your work and your figure development, posters, and all types of different content that you work with, that you can apply some of these principles. Okay, so we're basically going to be running over some very basic design principles and how we can apply this for you scientists. So we're going to be looking at spacing, we'll have a look at color, we'll go through fonts, looking at content itself and communicating content and making sure that that's easily absorbable and not overwhelming for your end user or your end person reading your papers. We're going to be looking at imagery, and then just some small things that can sort of finish off your posters or your presentations, things like that. So the first thing we're going to check out, if I can get this to move on, we're going to look at spacing. So spacing refers to the area and the shape that or form that occupies the space. And space can be defined as positive or negative. So you can, the positive space fills the space and the objects or elements in the design, and the negative space is that empty space or the open space between and around objects such as the background. So you can see that here, the positive space, and we have the negative space here, and all of this area is negative space. And I find working with most people who are not designers, this concept of positive space and negative space is very hard to balance or to get a good feeling for it and understanding for it. So as an example, you can see this slide here is often how I will get a PowerPoint presentation or a figure that might look like something like this. And you can see there's no sense of space. The fonts are huge. And we can go back and you can see the same information put on the same slide, but it just feels like it can breathe and you can absorb it. It doesn't feel distracting like this guy. So yeah, that is positive and negative space. And we really need to understand that spacing is very important when we're trying to communicate concepts and ideas. So one of the guidelines of design that we work in, and this is also in photography, it's also in film, is the rule of thirds. And it's a rule of thumb guideline which applies to composition design. So it's a rule of thumb, so it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to follow it to the rule, but it's a way that if you haven't got a good sense of or a good feeling for how something should sit on a screen or how you should compose something, you can try and apply this rule to try and help you with working out how something should sit on a page or how your poster should look, for example. And once you understand the rule of thirds, or if you learn about it, you'll see it you can see how it's applied everywhere. So the guideline basically proposes that the image should be imagined and divided into 9 equal parts by 2 equally spaced horizontal lines and 2 equally spaced vertical lines, and that the most important compositional elements should be placed along these lines or these intersections. People that support this technique claim that aligning the subject with these points creates more tension, energy, interest, than just simply centering an object on the screen or on your in your figure or your photograph. So I'll just show you if my thing will work again. Hang on, here we go. So you can see here, if we apply the rule of thirds to my composition that I've got here, you can see in the first third, I have my title. In the center area here, I have my centered content. And in the bottom part here, I have this little block of text here. This is not a perfect example of the rule of thirds, I must say, but you can kind of get the idea of how we apply that concept to layouts or posters. I've got a video I'm going to show you now, which talks about the rule of thirds in photography. So I think it's an interesting little video I found on TikTok. And there's a link there that people can watch it if they want. He basically goes through and shows you where, with the grid on the phone, how you can see this concept of rule of thirds in terms of photography and how it's worked. But this also can apply to your poster designs, for example, or your PowerPoint presentations, keynote presentations. So anyway, it's a nice, quick little video, and it's really worthwhile. And if you want to start thinking about that, even in like your photography or when you're taking photos, you can apply this grid on your phone and things like that. So you can start thinking about that. But as soon as you notice the rule of thirds, you will notice that, or that you're aware of it, you'll see it everywhere. Okay, so let's move on. Let's move on to color. So color theory, we won't go too much into this, but color theory basically creates a logical structure for color. And when we talk about color harmony, color harmony really is something that's pleasing to the eye. So we've got this like crazy sort of lollipop graphic here to the right, but somehow it works because there's an order, there's a balance in the visual experience, and it creates this harmony, creates or delivers a visual interest and a sense of order. So yeah, it's important that we have a good understanding about the use of color, and we're going to get to some tips right now about how to work with color. I'll just go back one more, sorry. So color tips in general, hold back, try not to go too crazy with your color schemes. Usually we try and stick to the rule of 3 colors. So if you look up here, we'll see there's a bit crazy, it's a bit mental, it's a little bit, yeah, doesn't sort of give that harmony and that order that we were just talking about before. So the main idea would be to choose one primary color and then pick an additional 2 other complementary colors. So I've just gone here with this little, if you look below, you can see we've got a primary color, which is the yellow, and then we've got the other 2 secondary colors, or you could look at it that the primary color is the purple and the 2 secondary are this. So you will see that applying that as well to your work will also improve things a lot. So yeah, be conscious about color in that way. Okay, so there's a great resource that you can use for your to help you with color, especially with figures. A lot of people are working with Excel, like working with graphs, working with PCA plotting and all of that sort of stuff. And sometimes it can get a little bit crazy. So you can use a tool like what's here in this Coolors or Colors, whatever you like to call it, .com. And you can create, you don't even need to start an account. You can check out some color palettes that they have there, but you can also generate and save your own. So, which I find super useful. And they have a tool also in there, which you will see here, which is, one second, this one here. There's an option where you can get the gradients of that particular tone. So it allows you to then apply that, the same color tone with multiple varieties of that to some graphs or plotting. And so that can also make a huge improvement to some of your figures as well. It also has another great tool on that website as well, which has a color blindness tool. So often publications will ask for you to make sure that you have a more high contrast, and you can check those different types of color blindness with this tool. And you can also then check it across all different types of color blindness, just to check. They also have another awesome tool here that's only pretty recent, which allows you to import a photograph and grab the color palette from the photograph, which I find it's been, yeah, really good. So back on our basics of color, we're having a look now at, I've just chosen some book covers here where you can see that principle of a primary color and some secondary colors after that. So let's have a look at our primary color with this Harry Potter series. And we've got the red, and we're using gray and black as our secondary colors. And then it's applied then to the other book covers as well. And then here on this album cover or book cover for Florence and the Machine, we've got the same kind of idea. We have these sort of three primary or three colors there, not going, it's not too crazy crackers there. What's that word? Crazy crackers. Anyway, so let's have a look at fonts. Let's move on from that. So it's important to sort of get an understanding for fonts as well, because we have two types of fonts. We have serif and sans serif fonts. So serif fonts are the fonts that have the little tails and the little flicks at the end. And a sans serif font is a font where you don't have those little flicks. So it's important that you kind of get to know your styles. So understand those different things. Different things also work better, for example, on screen and for off screen. So often figures for publication, they will request a sans serif font for all of the figure labels. So that would be something here like this font here, which I think is Century Gothic, but most publications will ask for Helvetica or Arial as the label font. So it's good to sort of just understand the difference between those two. So fonts, as you probably know or don't know, do convey moods and feelings. We get a kind of a feeling for something, or what, if it's a comic, or if it's something serious, if it's something playful, childlike, all those different sort of fonts can convey those different feelings. So for our international people, those who are not in Germany, you may not be familiar with this particular logo, but this is for a bank here called Commerzbank. And I'm wondering if there's anybody who can tell me what perhaps is wrong with this logo for a bank. Perhaps someone can, I don't know if anyone can write in the chat or tell me, is there something wrong with this logo? Comic Sans, puke, yes, exactly. It's a bit informal, exactly. It's a bank. So we know that this isn't an appropriate font for a bank. It doesn't look serious, Alfredo says, exactly right. But you can see that there's something a little off, and you'd be right. The bank would never use Comic Sans for that, and neither should anybody for any reason. No, it's okay. But this is the correct font that's being used for this. So yeah, just think about that too when you are creating your content, your visual content, that you think about fonts, and that yes, using Comic Sans or a scripty type childlike font probably isn't the most appropriate thing for your scientific figures. Someone says that perhaps it could be trying to be friendly and intimate to its customers. Yeah, you could make that argument, I guess, but as a bank, first and foremost, they probably, as their main brand, even with the playful brands that I can think of that are banks, they always still have quite a serious base, and maybe for campaigns or marketing activities, they might incorporate something that's a little bit more friendly or playful. But I think the base brands generally would use solid, sort of serious, especially for banks. Yes. So let's go on to looking a little bit more into fonts. So what I like to say is, and I think this is a general principle, it's not just me saying it, I didn't invent this, but is that try and stick to the rule of 2 fonts. So choose complementary fonts, one for headings and one for text. So in the case I show you here, we've got Helvetica as our title. We have a subtitle as Georgia Italic, and then, sorry, that you can see that the subtitle is that particular, like a serif font, and then we have Helvetica again. So, but if you are in doubt, always just use the one font instead use weight and color for variety, and always justify type left. We often only need to use justified text for formats like newspapers. It doesn't apply well to screen or into figures. I mean, if you look at any journal publication for figures, especially, they don't use justified text. They may in the body copy of the actual article, of course, because it is, you know, a magazine. But for your figures and even your posters, avoid it as well, because having a poster on a wall with justified text is also not the easiest thing for a person to read. So rule of 2 fonts, one for headings, one for text. When in doubt, just use the one font and use bolding and color for variety, and always justify your text type, justify your text to the left. Okay. Now, here we go. That's, so I just thought I'd just show you. When in doubt, that's just using the same font. Actually, something didn't render here. This is actually not the same font as Helvetica. I think it's Calibri or something. Sorry about that. But let's pretend that's Helvetica. Yeah, so you can see, just use color and bolding for that, for variety. I've got a slide here that's relevant to the Institute here, but just for showing you an example of what I mean, we have a serif font for our heading, because that is the branding of the Max Planck Society, and then we have a sans serif font for our body. So you can see that we just use the titles and the serif font for the titles, and the sans serif font for the copy, and left aligned, as you can see. Here's a nice infographic that's been created by a resource online. If I was to say there was something that really sticks out for me that I think is really, which is sort of a real key that you could take away here, but you'll have access to this as well, and you can have a look at some of those examples. Like I said before, it's combining a serif font with a sans serif font often works. So you can see some of these examples here. They give you the actual font name and the sub font, like as in the what you would use for your copy underneath. So usually the top one would be what you would use for your headings. Definitely one of the things here I think is a good tip is combining 2 similar fonts is not cool. So don't use 2 very close related sans serif fonts or serif fonts together. It just looks crap. It just looks messy. Contrast is the key. So yeah, keep that high contrast for probably the best thing for your titles, having a little bit more weight on the titles and then a bit lighter on your body copy. Again, stick to fonts, only 2 fonts, and only go for 3 if you must. I would never do that. I mean, most of the work that I do, I never, for posters, for designs, for magazine layouts, anything, I always only stick to 2. Very, very rarely would I see a necessity to go to 3. So just, and even stick to the 1. You will be totally safe with that as well. Don't mix different moods. I like that one. And you can see there's some other tips there as well. So perhaps you can check these out as well. So I was going to say to you that minds, well, I wasn't going to show you, but I hope you didn't see what just came up then, because I was going to ask, how often do you think our minds wander? So we're going to have a look at content. So how often, if you didn't see that slide before, I hope that you didn't just pretend that you're guessing, a percentage of how often does the human mind wander? Anyone in the chat? You can just pop it in there. 100%. Thanks, Maxine. Thanks. Okay. More often than not. Yeah, it's quite interesting, actually. Yes. Okay. So our minds actually wander 30% of the time. People only focus for a limited amount of time, 7 to 10 minutes max for a presentation. How am I going? What's the time? You're going to start wondering, so, oh, I've been going a bit longer than that. But so 7 to 10 minutes max for a presentation. So make the time count. So this has got to do with graphical content. Don't overload your slides. Make your time count. A study at the University of California was done on how often they thought for themselves, how often their minds wandered or they zone out. And most people thought it was around 10%, but in fact, it is exactly what I've got here. It was more like 30%. And what was even scarier was that they found in some cases when people were driving, it was as high as 70%. So yeah, I thought that was an interesting little tidbit of information. So yeah, make sure that you don't overload someone, keep it pretty focused. And I think that, yeah, you'll be able to communicate your science much better when you do that. Let's go here. Okay. So people only remember 4 items at once. Have a look. Can anybody tell me what they just saw? What items did they see? Apple car, chair, pig car, apple, yes, pig, apple and a sports car. Oh, the sports car, cool. Okay, so yeah, you were right. There was an apple, a sports car, a pig, and a chair. And this is really, really important when you're thinking about presenting information and presenting imagery, presenting figures. Think about how much is going on your slides and on your posters. You might be much better off reducing some of those items down just to some 4 core imagery or 4 core graphs or 4 core maps or whatever the mix might be. You might want to think about that, and that you would be much better off not overloading somebody with too much information. So, but you don't have to be this drastic. You can also group and chunk information, and people often use aids to remember. So if it's to do with like giving a presentation, people are maybe taking notes, so they will remember. But I always think that less is more. Oftentimes I'll get posters brought to me that with so much information. I just think, my goodness, we'd be much better off if we could take just a few of these pieces of imagery and just make it more focused and talk to some of the other points. What does it add to the value of communicating your work? So think about that with your slides. Yeah, I think that's always handy to keep that in mind. Okay, some imagery tips. So use image to break up your content, to draw your focus. I think it's really critical to remember the 4 items rule. People aren't remembering more than that. Always use high quality resolution imagery where you can. Avoid the free clip arty style stuff that you can get around the place these days. There's no really excuse for that. There's so much freely available high quality content that you can use. And I've just got one particular resource I use just for normal, like standard imagery, like landscape imagery, textures and abstract kind of photography, which can work in the background of some of your posters, for example, or in your presentations, and that's unsplash.com. So that's about imagery. Let's go on here. Okay, so the finishing touches. I always think in a presentation, I find the joltingness of a straight transition in a presentation to be too jarring. And I think that a subtle fade transition is a very nice way to polish off presentations. But when I say that, I don't mean that you should touch any other transitions, and they definitely are very distracting and gimmicky. So please try and hold off from that as well. If you're doing presentations in Adobe PDF, which some people do, I know at some conferences, you can also do transitions. That is also possible in PDF. I have a little tutorial here that you can see on how to do that. Okay, that's the end of my slideshow here.